Hi, I'm Adrian Simpson, one of Wavelength's co-founders and chief connector. Wavelength is a UK-based boutique executive education company with a global reach. Our specialism is bringing the outside world in for leaders. We indeed believe that leaders learn best from leaders and scour the world looking for examples of practitioners, organizations and leaders that have a compelling narrative to share on topics that are fore of mind for clients, and providing those clients with world-class doses of external inspiration, education, provocation, and of course, application. In today's podcast, I'm going to be talking about specific strategies to overcome the talent desert and why prison might be the answer. I'm going to also talk about the power of corporate and personal purpose to inspire 76% of your employees to go the extra mile. Also talk about why hybrid isn't working and why up to 70% of Apple employees agree. And I'm also going to talk about why China is unequivocally the world's most advanced digital economy and what lessons can be learned. So please tune in.
Congratulations! You are tuned into Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Show, the #1 podcast for Fortune 500 executives and those who are dedicated to creating a quantum leap in leadership. Your host, Dov Baron. He's an executive mentor to leaders like you, a contributing writer for Entrepreneur Magazine, CEO World, and he's been featured on CNN, Fox, CBS, and many other notable sites. Dov Baron is an international business speaker who was named by Inc. magazine as one of the top 100 leadership speakers to hire. Now, over to Dov Baron.
Welcome, dear friends, fans, and fellow aficionados of leadership excellence. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Leadership and Loyalty Tips for Executives. In 1982, Tom Peters co-authored a groundbreaking book called In Search of Excellence. It quickly sold more than 3 million copies. The book was the cutting edge of business and leadership practices. When he wrote the book, Chairman Mao had recently died. China was still a Soviet-style system, and they were making very little progress in closing the economic gap between China and other industrial nations. Here we are, more than 40 years and a digital revolution later. China has become the second largest economy in the world. The UK has left the EU. We've had a global recession in 2008 and in recent years, a pandemic. That's just a quick overview of some of the challenges in business since the 1980s. And we have to wonder, what does it take to create excellence in today's multi-generational workforce? Well, stay tuned, because that's where we're going over the next 2 episodes. We'll sit down with Adrian Simpson, a man who takes his clients around the world to sit down with companies that are creating excellence in today's wobbly political and economic climate. More about that in a moment. As always, we need your help in staying relevant, so please do us a favor. Get over to wherever it is that you tune into our podcast and rate, review, and subscribe to this show. It really helps, and we really do need your help. It's always valuable. Appreciate it. If you are a regular listener, big thank you to you for making us the #1 podcast globally for Fortune 500 listeners. We are honored and grateful to be cited by Inc.com as the #1 podcast to make you a better leader. By the way, I know you're curious. My name is Dov Baron, and I am your host, and I'm here to assist you tapping into the one thing in your business that changes everything by transforming meaning into action. Curious to know more? Simply go to dovbaron.com. That's DOVBARON.com. All right, let's strip it down and dive right in. Post-pandemic, we had the Great Resignation, followed quickly by a phenomenon known as quiet quitting, which means basically showing up to work but not really being there. How can we become high-performing organizations in what appears to be a talent desert? There's nobody there, it seems. Well, let's find out, because our guest for the next 2 episodes is Adrian Simpson. He is the co-founder of Wavelength Companies, and for 30 years, he's taken over 1,500 leaders physically and virtually inside the boardrooms and shop floors of some of the world's most admired, successful, and progressive organizations. In recent years, he's taken his clients to Silicon Valley, China, India, and to visit the likes of Apple, Alibaba, Airbnb, Tesla, Netflix, Lego, Ritz-Carlton Hotels, Arvind Eye Care Systems, Southwest Airlines, and that's just a few of them. Recently, he hosted a virtual symposium with the CEOs of IKEA, Unilever, and the president of the Four Seasons. He ran a 2-day Inside Digital China event that took 120 clients inside the unequivocally the best and the most advanced digital economy. Through their lenses, he experiences the defining characteristics of success and is uniquely qualified to advise organizations on how to become high-performing organizations, even in this talent desert. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together and help me to welcome Adrian Simpson! And the crowd goes wild, young man.
Thank you, Dov. That was a very generous, spirited introduction. It's a pleasure to join you today.
It's good to have you on, mate. I'm looking forward to this conversation because you've got a rather unique view in a lot of these things. But before we go to that, you know, as I said, my work is around helping people to find the meaning in their organizations, in their business, and because I believe that it's the most important thing, meaning and purpose. What is the origin story of what gives your life meaning?
I think there's almost two parts of that. When you were speaking at the introduction, you mentioned Tom Peters. And back in the 90s, when I was a teenager, out of the blue, my dad came home and he handed me a copy of that very mentioned book, The In Search of Excellence. And I was like 15, 16-year-old. It wasn't something he would normally do. It was just seemed to kind of be out of the blue. It wasn't. It was a very random act. And I read it and I absorbed it. And I just thought, God, surely every company in the world does what Tom talks about, which he talked about companies that just get it, right? That really put people at the epicenter of their purpose of being. And but I quickly realized that wasn't the case. And he told me and gave me some stories from the companies that he worked that illustrated the opposite. And then about very early in my career, I joined an incredible little innovation agency called What If in London. And in my first few months, I got the opportunity to get on a plane, go to Dallas, Texas, and visit what I regard perhaps as the finest organization in the world, which is Southwest Airlines, certainly the finest pure commercial organization in the world. And I got to walk down the corridors of this remarkable organization. And as soon as you walk in the door, it screams people and service and love and values, and there's a palpable sense of energy amongst the employees there. And it was an entirely kind of emotional experience. I spent an incredible couple of days at Southwest, and it had a really profound impact on me. And I thought, you know what, I want to inspire others with this possibility. I want to show others what a great place to work culture looks like, what the art of the possible looks like. And I've basically, that was the moment that kind of defined, I guess, how I've basically spent the rest of my career, which is trying to seek out examples around the world of practitioners, of organizations and leaders that just have a compelling narrative to share with our clients on themes that we know are of interest to them, and just show them the art of the possible, you know. And that, so I guess that those two were the source code, as you say, of my career.
You know, it's interesting because I will often say a company that does excellence in people is not always a company that does excellence in profit. And a company that does excellence in profit is not always a company that does excellence in people. I think they should be together. That's my opinion. But sometimes they're not. Sometimes that lacks. You, like myself, believe that purpose is a cornerstone, if not the cornerstone of what it means to be a business of excellence. Why do you believe it's so vitally important that a company not only knows its purpose, but lives its purpose?
I think there's two angles to it. I think one is a really great purpose has the ability to appeal to the intrinsic motivation of employees, to get them out of bed in the morning with a real spring in their step, to really get them so that it speaks more of shareholder value or profit. It really appeals to that. I think, secondly, a great purpose helps an organization focus on who they serve. It actually gives them a reason. It gives people a real guiding light. It gives them a true north as to why they exist. And I mean, I was to give you perhaps a couple of examples of my favorite ones. And I think there's also another angle on purpose you're going to come to, actually, which is about personal purpose. But I'll come to that in a minute. But in terms of in India, there is this truly astonishing organization called the Aravind Eye Care System, which is the largest specialist provider of eye care in the world. They've been subject to Harvard, Wharton, INSEAD case studies, and they have had one purpose since they started nearly 40 years ago, which is to eliminate needless blindness. That's the, and I have yet found a more clear, compelling, or concise purpose than that, right? And it is their absolute true north. And it has driven a clarity of decision making and operational excellence that beggars belief. And so, if I was just to expand upon that, so this is an organization that's treated over 70 million people in the last 40 years.
Let's just take a pause on that so people understand. That's 70 million
people.
Right? Yeah. 70 million people treated by this company, whose purpose is to eliminate needless blindness. Single focus, 70 million. That is a vast number.
It's about 5 million a year now they're doing.
Wow.
Yeah. But that's impressive. What's more impressive, Dov, is now they're structured that they are technically a non-profit, so in their structure, but in terms of their ethos, they outperform the private sector on every metric you would care about. So their productivity per surgeon is 5 times greater than the next best in the world. That drives a cost control, which is 1/100th of the National Health Service in the UK to do cataract operations. And that drives a quality which is about 60% better than the next best in the world. So you're doing 5 times the volume at 1/100th of the cost at 60% of better quality, right?
So as you hear that, just stop for a minute and think about your business, and see if you could compete with anybody with those kind of numbers.
Yeah.
Right. Are you doing it at 100th of the cost? I mean, it's
insane.
Crazy.
And it gets better, Duff. It gets better because they've never dropped their EBITDA has never dropped below about 35%. Now, of those 70 million people, just about 50% have never paid a dime for the treatment. Nothing. So you give away half your product. You create a 35% EBITDA at those levels of productivity and efficiency we spoke about earlier, right? Now, this is in no small part down to their clarity of purpose. They are so clear on their purpose is to eliminate needless blindness. It governs everything that they do, right? So, for example, their whole business model is designed to include the excluded. So, hence why they enable. So, if you will go to Aravind for your cataract surgery because it is the best in the world. There is no place in the world you could go better than Aravind. So you'll pay, if you can, full market rate for that surgery.
Sure.
But that enables them then to take that money, and the efficiency of the model means that they can afford to include the rural poor at neutral, literally at free of charge, or like dime on the dollar. And so when you talk about purpose, and just to expand upon it, just to finish on Aravind, and we can talk about them for the whole interview. But one of the other things is, when you walk around their hospitals, you will encounter signs on the walls behind various departments. And so you'll go to the housekeeping department and it will say, our role in the elimination of needless blindness is to ensure the healthy, sterile working environment for our patients and our colleagues. Medical record department. We are the medical record departments. Our role in the eradication of needless blindness is to ensure the accurate, timely recording of all information, literally, right? And when you've got purpose, when you can articulate it that well, that clearly for the people at the very, very front line of the organization.
That is superb. I mean, in our work around purpose with organizations, we will do that. We ask people to phrase your purpose into anything, into any department. And I've gone into companies, I'm brought in and I say, have you found your purpose? Oh yeah, we read Simon Sinek's Start With Why. Fantastic. That's great. Tell me what your purpose is. And they tell me, I'm like, okay. And I'm thinking, this is not your purpose.
Yeah.
This is some rattled off paragraph that you think is your purpose. And I don't, I'm not giving them shit for it. It's just like they don't understand the depth of the work. And so, and I say, okay, now put that into the context of accounting.
Yeah.
Because that's the place that's like, that's where it's going to get lost, right? Or in bookkeeping or something like, and they go, well, and they're struggling. This company you just mentioned, Aravind, it's so ingrained. One of the things I will say to people is this: the word cult has obviously a negative connotation, but expand the word cult, it's culture. That's what the word comes from. And you need a cult-like belief in the purpose of your organization. Absolutely. And when you talk about that purpose in the way that you just did with this company, it's cult-like. It's like, who would not leave and brag about it? Yeah. If you think about cults, they're always trying to get people in. Who would not leave and brag about it? And so, talking about this talent desert, one of the things we tell people all the time is, you should not be advertising for people to come work in. And they go, why? Is it because if your staff are not doing it, you're not doing a good enough job. If your people who work for you aren't doing it, you're not doing a good enough job, because they should say, oh my God, it's fantastic, you should come work here. Even if they're the kind of personalities that are generational, who are saying, I need to leave because I just want to do something else. Absolutely. But they are still saying, listen, I'm leaving because I want to go do something else. But if you want to go work for a great company, come work here. Yeah. But I'm not really into that. I know, but you'll just have a great time and it'll be fantastic for you. That is what you're talking about, right? Is that, have I got that right?
Absolutely. It is. It's, you say, I mean, in the new world, right, employees are choosing the employer.
Absolutely.
Right? And not the other way around, right? Yeah. And therefore you've got to do everything you possibly can to make yourself an attractive place to work. And I think in this world in which you're operating in, having a great purpose. The other piece of the purpose that I would want to just touch upon, which I find fascinating, is even within an organization that has its global purpose, which is helping individuals find their personal purpose. And so I had a pleasure recently of actually I hosted a podcast myself, an interview with Tim Munden, who is the former chief learning officer of Unilever, and which is an incredibly purpose-driven organization. And he said, they've got lots of data. And I really grilled him on, what's the commercial value? If you like, what's the really like hard numbers value on personal purpose? So he said, look, we've got absolute, load statistics that tell us the brands that had deep purpose perform better than those that didn't. He said, but we can go beyond that. He said, because we said, in order to be a purpose-led organization, we felt it was critically important for our employees to find their own purpose and to bring their own purpose to work. And incredibly, they created one-day purpose workshops, and they put 56,000 Unilever employees through purpose workshops to help them find and articulate their own personal purpose. And so including Alan Jope, the Unilever CEO, who talks about his personal purpose is to lead the adventure. And Tim talks about his is to nurture deep human possibility. And but the statistics, I grilled him. I said, well, okay, so what were the outputs? And he said, we did random controlled groups of people that had and hadn't been through the purpose workshops. And he said, we discovered that we had a 49% increase in intrinsic motivation amongst those that had been through the purpose workshops. They expressed 30% more satisfaction with their jobs. They were 27% happier just in their lives as human beings outside of Unilever. And they were 76% more likely to go the extra mile, right? So look at those numbers, right? 49% higher intrinsic motivation, 30% more job satisfaction, 27% happier in their lives, and 76 happy to go the extra mile, having done a one-day purpose workshop to help them find their purpose. 56,000 people. You tell me what the ROI on is having 56,000 Unilever employees having those kind of uplift of those kind of metrics, right? In addition to the clarity of purpose you can give your business or your brand like Aravind, which can take the entire organization to the next level.
Thank you for bringing this up, Adrian. It's so vastly important because, yeah, I believe, let me be clear about that. I believe that because in our work, we say, you need to know the purpose of your organization. But if you don't know your own purpose, you're going to have a lot of problems with that, making that stick. You're going to have a lot of problems with even understanding what drives another person who happens to work for you. So we do that work. We do with the executive team. We go, okay, what's your purpose, and how does your purpose create the purpose of this organization? Your collective purpose creates a purpose. And what we find is fascinating. When companies invest in that, we did this with a medical technology company recently, and they went, okay, we're going to invest in this. We believe you. We think it's going to work, right? But we've not seen. They didn't know the Unilever stuff, right? Okay, fine. Each one of those people came back and said their marriage is better, their relationships with their kids are better, they wake up in a better mood, they treat other people better, and it's not, I know I should do this. It's like, no, I'm actually more engaged in my life. We talk about engagement. There's billions and billions of dollars being spent on engagement. We've got this thing called the quiet quitting phenomena, which really is just saying everybody's disengaged. That's all it really means, right? People were disengaged before, but now they're really disengaged. Yeah. Well, why are they disengaged? Yeah. Because there's nothing to connect to. If it doesn't have meaning and purpose for the individual, why would I connect to the company, even if that has it? So this is thank you so much for bringing this up, because it's so vitally important. And it takes me to this next piece, which is, what makes a great organization? Because you've traveled all over the world, you've worked with all these companies, and I know in part 2 of the show I want to talk about your experience with China and what we can learn there. But for this part, let's just look at this. What does it make? What makes a great organization? We know its purpose. You just went through that. We know its purpose in the individual. We know its purpose in the organization, and we know that it's a cult-like purpose. It's embedded in everything. Yeah. What else?
I would say one of the definitive defining characteristics of great organizations, they are uncompromising on culture fit. Absolutely uncompromising.
Hallelujah.
And their sort of guiding principle is they recruit for attitude over skill, and aptitude and flexibility. And, I would, just to bring that to life for you. So I mentioned earlier the incredible Southwest Airlines. So I know the chief people officer there very well, and I was chatting to her last year, and I said to her, so Elizabeth, I said, so come on, recruit for attitude, train for skill. How does it work? And she said, well, let me give you an example. She said, if you are interviewing at Southwest and we invite you to fly to Love Field, she said, what you don't know as the interviewee is that we check back on every point of the value chain. So we'll check in with the flight attendants who flew on the plane that you flew on. We'll talk to the hotel receptionist. We'll talk to the shuttle bus driver. We'll talk to the doorman, and we'll talk to our receptionist, who they also call the director of first impressions, because that's what they are, right? Mm-hmm. And she said, one of my team will walk you to my office. If you get that far, because if at any point in that process you have basically been rude or discourteous to an air stewardess or the shuttle bus driver, they will terminate the interview. Because she said, ultimately, we're trying to figure out, are you the kind of person that's going to be rude to the waiter and charming to me as soon as you walk through the door, right? And so, you can talk about it, but that is a kind of guiding principle, illustrative story of what they're looking for. They're looking for people that are other-centric, that are, generous of spirit, that are interested in you, because they're a service business, right? They want to be in the service business, right? So, I think this uncompromising on culture fit is absolutely one of the key characteristics. I could speak about it for the whole interview, but one of my favorite quotes around it actually was just to say how some leaders view it. So many years ago, I had the fortune of going to Apple, and he's been gone quite a few years now, but Dan Walker, who was the former chief people officer there, And excuse the quote, but it was a great quote. He said, when it comes to people, he said, in recruitment, I have a simple philosophy. He said, I'd rather have a hole than an asshole, which I just thought was, and yet most companies, most leaders, when there's a vacancy, panic, and they just want to fill it with a warm body, and they don't interrogate the character of the individual, and they bring toxicity into their business. That individual then, is not taken out quickly enough. The toxicity spreads, the good people leave, and all of you're great. So I would say that is absolutely one of the key characteristics of great organizations. I would touch upon a few others. Sure. I mean, we can talk about this whole podcast is on leadership and loyalty, right? So yes. We could touch upon, authentic leadership, right? So really authentic leadership. And
so what does that mean? Because I actually took that word off my website for that reason, because one of the things I noticed was that people throw that word around. And yeah. I was using it for 20 years, and I took it off everything because it's like, well, this is an authentic microphone. Yeah. Everything's authentic. What does that mean? So when you talk about authentic leadership, I know that you have a context for that. And for me, context is king, not content, but context. Yeah. So what do you mean when you say authentic leadership?
I think I mean is leaders who demonstrate through their actions deep care for the employees and are really conscious of the shadow that they spread as their shadow as a leader. Ed Schein, MIT once, the only thing of importance that leaders really do is to create and manage culture, right? Absolutely. Yep. Bang on, dead right, Ed. That's all they do. And so I think when I'm talking about authentic leadership, there are leaders that are really attuned to that. So, give you a couple of examples or quotes. So, Colleen McCreary, who's now the chief people officer at Credit Karma, she once said to me, she said, when you have director in your job title, you have forfeited the right to complain in public, right? Which I think is just a great quote and so true of really good leaders, right? So if you're the kind of leader who basically sits in a meeting and nods along in violent agreement, right? And then immediately you leave and you go down the physical or virtual corridor and undermine everything that's been said and agreed, what kind of culture are you creating, right? Yeah. So, that's not authentic. That's the opposite. That's the opposite of authentic leadership. It's about leaders who are, Dave Ridley, who was the former Z4 board member at South, one to about, he said, every leader should be a CEO, a chief encouragement officer, right? Which again, I love reframing the role of a CEO. That if you are encouraging and championing your people with your actions and your words and giving them air cover, that for me is an authentic leader. I think these days, increasingly, vulnerability, right? Yes. Which is authentic, like being, I'm not talking about just your whole soul on the table here. But I think in the old world, leaders were expected to turn up with the answers, right? Yes. These days, if you do that, people are going, seriously? Like, you've never tried? And I don't believe you, you're a fraud, right? We're actually sharing yourself, some of your struggles, some of your challenges, genuinely asking for advice, for input, showing who you are as a person, I think, demonstrates authenticity. So, I could go on, but those for me are perhaps some tangent points. I mean, maybe one other story. I think, authentic. I mentioned earlier about chief encouragement officers. One of the leaders we've had great pleasure of using as a speaker and as a friend and various ventures, a gentleman called Sir Martin Neri. Martin, is a British leader. He ran the prison service in the UK. He ran big charities. He's run government quangos. Very accomplished leader. And he talks about actually the simple importance of things like saying thank you, right? Mm-hmm. And actually doing it in a really genuine way. So Martin talked about when he went into the prison service, it was profoundly broken. And he decided he wanted to have a platform of dignity and respect. And he come up from being a prison officer to the top job, right? And he said, dignity and respect was what I wanted to instill. And he said, what I did, he said, when I would go around the prisons, around the country every week, and I would look for examples of individuals, prison officers who treated prisoners with dignity and respect. He said, and I'd write their names down. Then on a Friday afternoon, I'd go to my office and I'd handwrite them a letter. And I'd handwrite the envelope and I'd stamp it and not frank it. And I'd put it in the post, right? And then, and you think about that. Then you think about a Saturday morning, chances are you open that letter in front of your significant others, and there's a handwritten note from your Director General, CEO, thanking you for showing dignity and respect to a colleague or others, right? You think of the ripple effect on that. But but that's really authentic leadership for me, taking that time, taking that care, and he had this sort of mantra of, the good news finds its own way in an organization. I make it my job to make sure the good news gets around.
That's right? Fantastic.
So I think, that for me is when you get really authentic leadership.
That's a beautiful example of what authentic leadership really is. Thank you so much for sharing that. I'm loving this conversation. It is a delicious conversation. Thank you so much, Adrian. We're already at the end of part 1. We're going to be back in part 2. We'll talk more about this. I want to talk about your trip, your adventure into this, into the digital economy of China, the revelations of that. I want to talk a little bit more about China because, as I talked about in the intro, it's become, it was this Soviet-style communist country that was way back there, has become the second largest economy in the world. And it, digitally, it's something else altogether. I want to talk more about that. And I want to talk more about that because it's also the other side of this excellence thing. So you do things really well, but are you treating the people really well? And over here on Southwest, you're treating the people really well, and are you doing really well? So it's, it's both sides of that. So I want to come back to that. Before we go into part 2, please tell people where they can find out more about you, about your organization, about all the things that you do.
Thank you. Our website is just wavelengthleadership.com is the best place to head to for that. I'm on, obviously, LinkedIn. Adrian Simpson, a co-founder and chief connector of Wavelength is what I go by. And also, we have our own Making Waves podcast series we're starting to do as well. So we do some podcasts with some authentic leaders around the world. So I would say probably the website is the best one to go to, LinkedIn as well. And if you want to follow the Making Waves podcast, you can hear more about from me and also some of the remarkable people that I get to meet and interview and spend time with.
Wonderful. We will, of course, make sure that all those links are posted on the show notes so that you can find Adrian, you can find his organization and all about it. Till then, we're going to be back in one click. So stay curious, my friends, stay curious about what it really means to be an authentic, really, truly authentic leader and create excellence in your organization that has the numbers that show you that putting people first makes profit jump. This is Dov Baron. I'll be back with you in one click. Stay curious, my friends. Stay curious.